Hey, Jefferson Calico here. Have you ever heard the expression that the eyes are the windows to the soul? Most of us have. Eyes to your eyes. Well, do you believe that? Do you believe that by gazing into someone's eyes, you can see deep inside them, right? See all the way into their soul. Maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you have experienced the feeling of a deep connection with someone when you catch their eyes. Or perhaps you've had the experience of looking at someone only to have them quickly turn their eyes away from you. Why is that? What's that all about? It seems like there's a power or an energy, even an intimacy in looking into someone else's eyes. Well, that experience is at the heart of a Hindu practice known as Darshan, which we're going to spend a few minutes talking about today. Okay, so Darshan is probably better understood as part of the larger practice of puja. Now, puja is discussed in your book, chapter 3, in a section of titled Devotional Hinduism. And if you read through there, it'll just sort of describe puja. But puja is basically offering worship to the deity through the image. So venerating the deity through his or her image or images. And generally that would be done at an altar. There will be an altar with one or more images of the deity. And the worshiper approaches the altar and the images and proceeds to offer this worship. In a temple setting, this is often done by a priest, pujari, or one who is schooled in the ritual and knows how to perform the ritual. And at home, this would be done by a lay Hindu practitioner. So the practice of puja, or offering worship, venerating the deity through its images, involves a number of steps or other practices as part of the worship. So it might include things like bathing the image with water or milk, dressing the image. This is usually done in a temple setting. It'll also involve burning incense before the image, and maybe doing the arti, which is the light offering, which is would be a small oil lamp with a wick, which is lit and then offered in this way to the deity. The ringing of bells, which is an auspicious sound and gets the attention, in a sense, of the god, lets the god know that you're here. But it's also these vibrations, see, which are auspicious. The offering of food. So food will be brought by the worshiper and set before the deity and sanctified by the presence of the god, and then offered back or given back to the worshippers as a blessing. The worshippers will then eat the food as a blessing, so sort of the blessing of the deity in this very concrete way. That's called prasad, or the food offering. Of course, praying, singing, maybe reciting scripture to the deity. And then this practice of darshan, which is viewing the deity, connecting to the sacred, to the divine, through the eyes of the image. So let's talk about that in particular a little bit more. So one thing to understand about Hindu worship, or puja, is that it's a very sensual type of practice, meaning that it engages all the senses of the worshippers. So you've got the smell, right, of the incense, and you hear the sound of the chanting and the songs, the hymns, the bells ringing. You've got the taste of the prasad, the offering, blessed food. You've got the feel, perhaps, of the sandalwood or the ash that you use to put the talak on your forehead. So it engages all the senses. And then, of course, the sight of the gods on the altar and the practice of the worship going on. So Darshan specifically engages that visual sense. It's visual, all those ways, the sound, the taste, the hearing, the smells, all these are ways of connecting to the divine. But it's the visual contact through Darshan that is particularly powerful. It's that deep, sudden connection, right, that we have felt with other people that we can also make with the divine. So visual contact with the divine is sort of the first point about Darshan. And so secondly, that's concretely and specifically, that is enacted by beholding the divine presence through the eyes of the image. Now, it's important to know that the Hindu worshiper isn't really worshiping the image itself, but by, just like the eyes are the window to the soul, right? So by staring into someone's eyes, you're actually connecting with what's deep down inside them. So by looking into the eyes of the image, what you're actually connecting with is not the concrete image itself, but the divine presence that's behind that image and coming through the image. But this is a very concrete practice. It's looking into the eyes of the image and through the eyes of the image connecting to the divine presence that's behind it, not the image itself. And a third important point about this is that Darshan is experienced and thought of as a reciprocal practice. So as you look into the eyes of the image, the deity, God, is looking back at you. And you are receiving that divine presence or that divine energy, that divine blessing and connection through that reciprocal practice of seeing and being seen by the deity. So your book mentions the term and defines the term Darshan in a section called the Guru as the object of devotion. And so we want to talk a little bit more about this. Not only do you connect with the divine or the sacred by gazing into the eyes of the image of a deity, but it can also be people, particularly gurus or people who are particularly holy. So your book defines Darshan as presence, that is to be in the presence, to be in the divine presence. So the idea here is, how can we connect to the divine by gazing into the eyes of the guru or the teacher? So the idea here is that the closer we become to divinity, then the more the divine presence radiates from us or shines through us. Now, to understand that, you need to understand the teaching of Hinduism about the Atman. The Atman is the little piece of the divine soul, the little piece of God, if you will, the little divine presence that is within all of us. And the outer part of us, this body, this personality, is just a husk that houses the Atman. And through many lifetimes, many new forms that the Atman puts on, the Atman becomes refined. It becomes closer and closer to re-emerging and reconnecting with the divine soul. You might think of a scratch-off lotto ticket. So on the scratch-off lotto ticket, right, there's a box, and underneath that box, within that box, if you will, the scratch-off part, there is some sort of prize, right? So let's say underneath that box it's the $1 million or whatever, right? And so you get a key or something, a fingernail, and you begin to scratch off that outer covering. And the more you scratch off the outer covering, then that prize begins to shine through the stuff, right, that was encrusted over the prize, the reward. And so the human being is like this. So our outer, our personality and our body and these things, these temporary things, are like that covering over the prize. They hide and obscure the Atman, the divinity that really resides within each of us. So the idea of Hindu practice then is to slowly get rid of this, to overcome, to scratch off, if you will, the outer covering that hides the divinity within us. And so the more we're able to do that through worship practices, through meditation, through ascetic practices that the Guru has gone through, the more we sort of cleanse ourselves, the more we scratch off that outer surface, and the prize within, the divine presence begins to radiate or shine out of us. So the Guru is one who's gone through this process, who's really become detached from the world, and whose divine spark, whose Atman, is really shining through. So the Guru, through all these spiritual practices, has become very holy, very close to the divine, and the divine, and now the Guru radiates the divine presence. The divine presence shines through him or her. So to be in the presence of someone like this, to be in the presence of the Guru, is really to be in the presence of the sacred as it radiates. To be in the presence of the divine. Yes, to be in the presence of God. So by venerating the Guru, what you're actually connecting with, is God, the divine. By looking into the eyes of the Guru, just like looking into the eyes of the idol or the image, you're connecting with what's behind that, and that's the divine presence. So let me just read this section from your book. Your book says that this belief explains the intriguing practice of darshan, or presence. Because people of spiritual accomplishment are thought to radiate their divine nature, disciples find opportunities to be in their presence. Sometimes a holy person will sit or stand silently, allowing the devotees to come forward one by one to look into the teacher's eyes and to experience the divine energy that shines out. So that's the practice. It's almost identical to the darshan that's done with the idol or the images, but in this case it's a living person. So to gaze into the Guru's eyes, or to gaze into the eyes of the image, is to receive the blessing of the deity, of the sacred. So it's to receive it, right? To take it in through our eyes, deep into our soul, and then in turn to be changed and transformed by it. Now it's important when we think about this change, what change is taking place. It's important to understand that this is not necessarily a cognitive practice. It's not about understanding a doctrine or believing in some sort of conceptual truth. It's about that divine energy which burns away impurity into us to change us in organic, psychological, and emotional ways. Instead of being cognitive, it's much more about how we are changed by being close to someone, by intimacy, by love with another being.